Yo, y'all ready for this? Yeah.
What's up, Bodybuilding.com listeners? My name is Danielle Bitts, and welcome back to the BBcom podcast. Today, I'm joined by Jacob Zemer. Jacob is a performance coach who works remotely with executive-level clientele, helping them lose weight through nutrition, exercise, and accountability. Jacob has an authentic approach to fitness and nutrition designed for people with demanding careers, families, and real-life priorities. He works with people who are concerned with their health and for whom fitness is a passion, but not the number one priority. He's been featured on CNN, Fox News, and various publications for his relatable, no BS approach to fitness and nutrition. Jacob, welcome to the pod.
Danielle, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
This is kind of surreal. Like, I grew up with Bodybuilding.com, like going on the forums. Before I had a formal education, it's really like how I learned to train and learned a lot about nutrition.
Oh, I love to hear that. We have an OG on today. I'm excited to jump in.
Yeah, I was one of those kids who discovered working out really through the internet. Like YouTube and things like that are what taught me, and Bodybuilding.com is what taught me like the foundations of nutrition and training prior to my education.
Yeah, amazing. Jacob, I wanna hear a little bit about yourself. I want to hear how you got to where you are today.
Yeah.
And then I want to jump right into things.
Sure.
So I want you to give us to it straight. Everybody, we are talking weight loss 101. So first, Jacob, tee us up with a little bit about your background, who you are, where you come from, and then let's get into that weight loss 101.
Sure. So I am from a town called Portville, New York. It has a population of 959 people. My mother became pregnant with me at 16 years old. My dad was not very involved. He was a bit of an alcoholic. And I really didn't have much of self-esteem growing up. And I had ADD, struggled with reading, things like that. And when I turned 14, my mom was like, why don't you try out the YMCA? Why don't you go? And I immediately gravitated to that environment. The men there, I was like, that's what I want to look like when I grow up. And I started weight training, and I got really engrossed in the culture. And that really was like my first sense of self-esteem. I had like a sense of confidence through working out. I was super skinny. I was so skinny. And but I stuck with it, and I kept pushing myself. And through that, I really found not only a passion, but then eventually a career. And I didn't even think I was going to go into fitness. I was always definitely afraid that if I did what I do now, I would be poor. So I tried to avoid it for a period of time. But eventually, I'm so glad that I made the decision. I made the leap to take a career into fitness. And now, today, I have like a dozen certifications. I've been on a ton of publications and news and podcasts and things like that. And my footprint, my contribution to the world is I have helped thousands of people lose weight. And some people who can't afford services, who just watch me on Instagram, where I have a large following, Jacob Zemer, all the way to clients. I have a large remote client business where we coach people, and just have been able to like have a positive impact on the world and to change my life through helping change other people's lives.
Yeah, the thousands of transformations that you've helped complete, over the number of years that you've been doing this is tremendous. It's apparent on the social footprint that you have, and just the testimonies to the work that you do and the lives that you change. So I really do want you to give it to us straight, Jacob. When it comes to weight loss 101, let's do some myth busting here.
Yes.
So run us through the things that do matter when it comes to shredding fat, perhaps the things that don't need to be as stressed as they typically might be due to influence, pseudoscience, or plain old misinformation. So somebody comes to you, Jacob, and they say, hey, I want to lose weight. I've tried for years. I can't do it. What's that high level starting point for you?
Sure. I actually consider myself like the anti-influencer, like you've ever heard the phrase anti-hero, because I just try to talk about real applicable stuff for real people. And I think when it comes to fat loss, there's a trinity. And it is first and foremost being in a caloric deficit, which simply means that you are burning more calories than you're consuming. And that is the most pivotal thing that you can do when it simply comes to losing weight and fat loss. The second most important thing that you can do, or equally as important, is 0.8 times your body weight in protein. You need to consume protein. And the reason that's so important is when you think about body fat percentile, it's obviously a fraction or a percentile. There's a numerator and denominator. So one of the ways you can decrease body fat is by building muscle without gaining fat, or losing fat while maintaining muscle. And so protein helps you do that. So for most of my clients, I set that around 0.8 times your body weight. And that goal is simply a floor, which means that's the minimum amount of protein. So take me, I weigh approximately 240 pounds. Say my protein goal is 200 grams. It doesn't matter if I have a little bit more. It's just not going to necessarily benefit my body fat percentile, but that 200 grams is the minimum amount I eat every single day. And the third part of the trinity is weight training. And weight training is just so vital because, again, it's going to help you either build or maintain muscle. And both of those things are part of lowering your body fat percentile. And those are, I would say, when it comes to fat loss, those are the three most important things you can do.
Where does BMI come into play here? This historically has been a big metric that we're going to our annual physical. This is how we're determining whether an individual is healthy, not healthy, obese, not obese. What are your thoughts on BMI today?
Yeah, I'm going to upset some people, and I might even upset you, Danielle. But BMI is still relevant from a public health standpoint. So the WHO, the World Health Organization, just did this major study, 30 years, over 400,000 people globally. And what they found is 1 in 8 people are now obese. That obesity is now a greater epidemic than starvation, at least at a global level. And so BMI applies to basically over 95% of the population. Now, here in the States, and for most of the people who are listening to this podcast, we have the luxury of what is known as bioimpedance scales. So these new scales that you buy on Amazon, you step onto the scale, it's going to send a low voltage through your body, which is going to then be able to pretty accurately, there's some wiggle room in that, maybe 10% margin of error, which is pretty significant, but it at least can detect the difference between fat and muscle. And so that's going to give you a better indicator of where your body fat actually is. But there's rare occasions where BMI is not relevant, even with myself. So I am technically like 33 BMI, which means that I am between obese and morbidly obese. Well, I'm not. I have probably closer to 10% body fat. I can fully see my abs. But even with my BMI being that elevated, I have to have my body fat under 15%. So even if you have the excuse of, I'm just very muscular, for that to be true, you need to be able to see your abdominals when you're in the mirror. It's not the soul, but it's still relevant. And I know people hate to hear it. They love to bash it these days, but it's still relevant, especially for public health.
You touched on this a second ago. You said strength is one of those 3 key pillars when it comes to weight loss. I want to talk about strength versus cardio. What is the quote unquote golden split? And now we're always going to say it depends, right?
Yeah.
I think we say that probably every episode that we film here. But why does it depend? And briefly touch on this now. We are going to get to this later in the topic. But when we're looking at the strength versus cardio ratio for weight loss, what's the general recommendation?
So cardio is vastly underestimated when it comes to health. And I think that's changing. The stigma is actually the lack of understanding of how important it is for your health is going away. But when it comes to strictly fat loss, like trying to get shredded for the summer, weight loss is vastly superior. And the reason, again, is because when you look at body fat percentile, it has both, if you can build muscle while losing fat, you decrease body fat percentile. If you can lose fat while maintaining muscle, you decrease body fat percentile. And so for that reason, if you were strictly to build a program for fat loss, you would prioritize weight training over it. And the correct amount of weight training is what you can recover from. So if you can train 4 days a week and you find that you're adequately recovered and every session you're not sore and you're able to keep lifting more and more weight, marginally, like maybe you add a 2.5 on each side of the bar, or you add 5s on each side of the leg press, or you're getting 1 extra rep, then maybe there's room to start training 5 days a week, or maybe 6 days a week. Most weeks I train 5 to 6 days a week, and that is ideal for fat loss. But that doesn't mean that for health reasons, you shouldn't incorporate cardio. It's not as vital as people think. Unless you're a long distance runner and you're just piling on miles, it's not going to be the golden ticket to fat loss.
And when we say weight training, what style of weight training are we referring to?
So for strictly fat loss, again,
Yes.
It would be hypertrophy-based or bodybuilding-based. And the reason I say that is, again, because it's just a game of how much muscle you have on you versus how much fat. That doesn't mean that there's not room to do kettlebells or CrossFit or any of these other different modalities. But when you're talking about strictly fat loss, you want something that's going to put muscle on your body. And the most efficient way to do that is, a split that allows you to train a muscle somewhere between 2 and 3 times a week. And for most people, they'll benefit from training the same muscle group at least twice. A lot of people really gravitate, we'll talk about it in more detail later, I think, but a lot of people gravitate to push, pull, and legs, or I do legs, push, pull, because I prioritize lower body. And that's a good generic split for most people. It allows you to train each muscle twice.
Getting in those fundamental movement patterns.
Yes.
Sure. Again, we're covering weight loss at a very high level, and then we do have 2 or 3 additional topics that we're going to dive into very shortly here. So moving a bit to a high level of nutrition, you hit it on it before. Caloric deficit is going to be huge. Diet culture, fad cultures, all of it, carnivore, keto.
Yep.
We could sit here for hours and talk about each of those, right, and the benefits versus the negatives. But let's talk about, when I say dieting, I'm more so referring to restrictive eating, versus more so training your mind to think about whole foods and that caloric deficit.
Yeah.
Let's break down nutrition at a high level.
Sure. So at a high level, nutrition is about sustainability. It's about consistency. Being able to do something consistently, even if not optimal, is better than something that's done optimally but not consistently. So the same is true with nutrition. When I think about how to start thinking about nutrition, I would say prioritizing protein is a really incredible place to start. And the reason for that is protein has a high satiety. It's very satiating. It also is going to guide your food decisions because most junk food isn't high in protein. So just by having a protein goal, it's going to help you with nutrient selection. And then the other factor is it's going to help with body composition because protein helps maintain and build muscle. And I think we've nailed that topic in enough times, but it's very vital. And then fiber. Fiber is incredibly important. Everything that we see about fiber, the more and more we learn about it, it's so important to get enough fiber in your diet, which really means plenty of fruit and vegetables, and then maybe finding fiber in some other foods or products as well. But I think it's very important to track your fiber again because it's satiating, it's going to keep you feeling full, and at the same time, the health benefits are massive. I think also really you want a partnership when you are starting to think about long-term nutrition. I am one of the most quantitative guys in the world. I'm very data-driven, and I know the number one reason people hire me is for partnership and accountability. And when you look at the success rate on a diet, it's 3%. And of the 3% that are successful, about 80% of those people will eventually regain the weight. But when you add a companion to that journey, whether it's your friend, whether it's a trainer, whomever, that statistic jumps significantly. And when there's 3 or more people involved, so now when you start to get like a community of people, like a team of people, whether it's a trainer or a nutritionist, a couple friends who are going to get the workouts in with you, it becomes far more likely that you'll be successful.
Yeah, I think it's, like I said before, it's the restriction aspect that really can put you in an isolating spot and then just send you down a route for failure, right?
Yes.
Let's just say it that. I mean, eating 2 hard-boiled eggs is more filling to me than, reaching for a bag of chips. And after I eat those 2 hard-boiled eggs at 2:00 in the afternoon between some of my calls, I'm like, I'm good.
Yes.
Like, I don't need anything else. But those days where I sneak for a couple other things, now I'm going for a second thing and a third thing. So the satiation is absolutely true when it comes to the high protein. Go ahead.
Sorry,
No.
I have 340 grams, which is one of those big containers of raspberries every morning. It's a ton of fiber to start my day.
Exactly.
And I have that along with some protein. And, I don't need to eat for 3-4 hours later as a person with a very high resting metabolic rate.
Right. I was going to say in fiber, that's been a big, big add for me. I would say over the last 3-4 years, not only for the gut microbiome benefits that we're now seeing, but same thing, satiation and just longevity. I mean, the things, I'm making my nightly shake. That's when I do my protein powder, but I'm doing hemp seed in there. I'm doing flax seed in there. I'm adding everything, all the seeds that I may not be getting in my daily diet. I'm sprinkling hemp seeds on my salads and on my lunches and things of that nature. It goes a long way. And, hemp seed, a scoop of hemp seed, you get 10 grams of protein out of something like that. It adds
protein,
up.
Fiber, and then the omega-3s.
Right.
Massive. So,
right. Yeah. Let's jump into sleep's role in weight loss because I don't think people necessarily correlate weight loss and sleep, but we need to talk about it.
Yeah. So this is probably the most depressing thing that we're going to talk about today.
We'll get it done early.
Yeah, let's get it over with. It's probably the most, either that or the amount of exercise that you should be doing because people have careers, they have families. The truth is that physiology is heartless. It does not care about your feelings. It does not care about your schedule. It doesn't care about what you have going on in your life. And I always tell people, I have a very strong tone in coaching. I push people. And part of the reason for that is because I say we're up against something far more brutal than I am. And when it comes to sleep, adults should be getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep. And so it's not just the quantity. We all are aware also it should be quality sleep, but also it's the consistency. which just makes it's a very hard combo because you should be going to sleep roughly the same time every night and waking up the same time every morning. And most people weekends that time shifts, but the reality is consistency of sleep is one of the most important factors. And these things like the quantity, the quality, and the consistency from a hormonal level standpoint, testosterone, leptin, I could go on, but also from a diet adherence standpoint, everything we have indicates the less sleep you get, the more likely you are to adhere to your diet. So get your labs done annually. Make sure that you're testing, and also really do your best to prioritize sleep. I have a dedicated sleep ritual that I do where I use blackout shades. I put the temperature of the room to 65 degrees. I have a pretty strict bedtime. It's really important to cultivate good sleep and do it consistently.
I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was actually just having this discussion. They just came out with an updated study for women. They recommended 9 to 10 hours. And honestly, I need that.
I know.
I like the luxury that 9 hours is, but let me tell you the difference of me waking up 9 hours versus 7 hours. I feel it. And for me, sleep has become the biggest game changer, not in the sense that I wasn't a great sleeper before, but just the way I'm laser focused on it now, and the ability that I now can recognize a good sleep versus a not great sleep, and how that impacts the rest of my day, from my food choices to how I feel in my workout to how I'm even speaking to people in my workplace, right? Or my partner at home.
Yeah.
Sleep is, for me at least, number one these days.
I get 8 hours of sleep probably 4 to 5 nights a week, and the other nights I get 9 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
And like I said, consistency, there's about an hour window earlier or later sleeping in or going to sleep, but you want to keep it around that. And most nights I'm going to bed around 9. On the weekends it's a little closer to 10, and I'm getting those 8 to 9 hours of sleep.
Yeah. In that conversation I was having, someone said to me, who has the time? And I'm like, but think of just try it. I think that's my challenge, right? I think you need to try it. I think when it comes to anything for sleep and nutrition and movement, you can sit here and preach to people what's worked well for you, what's worked for previous people that you've worked with. Until somebody actually starts trying something for themselves, they're likely not going to really recognize that until they start to see their lives change. And that's my biggest thing in that right now that I'm pushing is just try to go to bed an hour earlier, 40 minutes earlier, and try to get into that routine.
But you're hitting it the nail on the head, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about do not mindlessly eat today. And the same is true about sleep. Look, maybe you have a newborn baby. Maybe you have off hours for work right now. I get it. But just be diligent and do the best you can. Don't get obsessive with perfection. When you hear 8 to 9 hours, a lot of people, or 7 to 9 hours, people immediately shut down. Don't shut down. Do the best you can, and over time it will get easier. And perhaps while circumstances change in your life, it will also become easier. But just be aware and start to think about what can I do and where can I get the wins where possible.
Right. I agree. You touched on this hormonal. I want to talk about hormonal imbalances being a blocker for weight loss, because this is something else that is becoming a huge topic. And it can be a catalyst for weight gain and the overall importance of labs for fitness goals. So let's touch on hormones a bit.
Yeah. So I want to start by saying burning more calories than you consume, caloric deficit, is still how you lose weight, regardless of hormones. However, there are hormonal imbalances such as hypogonadism, where you have clinically low testosterone. There are medical conditions like hypothyroidism. These things affect things like your body's composition. If you have clinically low testosterone, you're obviously not going to be able to build and recover as well, build muscle and recover from workouts as well. If you have hypothyroidism, even though it's still how many calories you burn versus you consume, you are burning less calories because your metabolism is not as functional. So at the end of the day, you can still lose weight regardless of what's going on with your hormones. However, you want to make it as easy on yourself as possible. And so optimizing your hormones is going to make it much simpler to get the body, the physique that you've always wanted. And so it's imperative that you get your labs done every year, and especially important ones like lipids, like apolipoprotein, things like low density lipoprotein, Those are lipid markers, triglycerides, which probably people are more familiar with, and also on top of it, getting your testosterone checked, having your estradiol checked, having your thyroid checked. You want to have these markers checked, and you want to be doing them, again, at least once a year. You get to 40, 35, 40, depending on family history. You should be doing it at least twice a year.
Yeah, I've gotten to the point where I'm doing every quarter at this point. I'm just so dialed in. Again, this episode is about not being obsessive to the point where it's, but if you are someone who has a history, for myself, I have autoimmune. So, it's something I really like to be dialed in on. But blood work is the gold standard in terms of, dictating what adjustments you need to make to your routine.
I think it's great to not get obsessive about food. It's okay to be obsessive about health. Like, especially if you have prostate cancer in your family, be obsessive about your PSA. If you have heart disease in your family, be obsessive about your coronary calcium scan and getting your lipids done, because you need to be alive to play the game. All right. So it's one thing to be obsessive about is health.
Right. Let's talk about VO2 max, Jacob. This is the last point for topic 1 before we dive into topic 2. Where does VO2 max importance? Because I feel like VO2 max historically has been tied to performance athletes and people who are pursuing a specific sport. But when it comes to Gen Pop, it's like, what's a VO2 max? Let's talk about that.
100%. So we've talked strictly about fat loss here today and why you should prioritize weight training. However, when it comes to health, VO2 max is your leading indicator of longevity. What does that mean? It's your leading indicator for how long your lifespan will be. So VO2 max simply looks at the maximum amount of oxygen you can utilize while doing intense exercise. And so this score, so if you're between 35 and 45 and you're a man, superior VO2 max is around 50. If you're a woman in that same age bracket, it's around 45. You're younger, the score has to be higher. If you're older, the score has to be lower. But that VO2 max number is an indication of how long you will live. And you can raise that number, thankfully, through a couple of means. Zone 2 cardio, very effective, though you do have to do a lot of it. Or you can do intense intervals of cardio. Like zone 4, zone 5, where your heart rate is 80 to 90% of your max, or 90 to 100% of your max. Those will help increase your VO2 max. But we've talked so much about how you have to weight train for fat loss, but for health, cardio is really vital, and VO2 max is simply something you can go and have a test ran. They'll put a mask on you. You'll breathe into it. I did it using an AirDime. I had a score of 53, puts me in the superior range. I was really happy about that because I'm not a cardio bunny. I do cardio every week, but I much more prioritize weight training over cardio.
Yeah, and it is becoming more accessible. I get mine here down at Bespoke Physical Therapy in Midtown, and it's becoming more accessible than it used to be even 5 years ago at this point, which I love to see.
And people are more aware of it. Correct.
The general awareness is certainly growing.
Yeah. I did want to mention one thing before we move on. We talked totally about what's the actual truth to weight loss, but I don't think I mentioned any of the myths. So I do think it's important to just say myths that I see all the time about weight loss: carbohydrates. It's such a villainized macronutrient. The truth is, I have coaching clients, I have them track their total calories, their protein consumption, and their fiber. The exact macro breakdown of carbs and fats, it does not matter when it strictly comes to body composition. Now, carbohydrates are protein sparing, which means if you have carbs, you need less protein in your diet. But other than that, as long as you're having adequate protein, there's no bearing on composition. And this macronutrient is still villainized. And then now I think another myth.
Carbs are not the enemy.
They're not the enemy at all. And they're yummy.
Yeah.
They're yummy.
No, they're the energy drivers.
100%.
Yeah.
And fruit and vegetables are carbohydrates.
Yes, which not many people understand that also.
Yes. And if you want to talk about something that just from a diet standpoint, there are no, which is the next myth I would say, is there are no magic foods that prevent you from losing weight, perhaps other than alcohol. I'll talk about that in a second. But there are no magic foods. Like, you can have ice cream and still lose weight as long as you're burning more calories than you consume. But if you want to talk about, there are certain foods that make dieting easier, fruit and vegetables are certainly those, because they're so low in calorie while being so high in fiber, and the micronutrient benefit like polyphenols, antioxidants, vitamins, minerals are so high, so they're going to help you feel satiated and full and feel excellent while dieting. So I think those are two major myths that are out there that they just need to be pushed away.
You mentioned alcohol. Did you want to touch on something there?
So alcohol might be the one exception. Look, I know it's not a popular topic, but it's a group 1 carcinogen. It's listed under the same thing as cigarettes or tanning beds. I drink from time to time. but that might be the one thing that actually will affect in terms of calories in, calories out, because it blunts muscle protein synthesis. So it's not going to allow you to have an optimal body composition if you are drinking on a regular basis.
Would it be fair to say if we are going to remove something, is alcohol something to remove?
Yeah, and look, some of my clients love when I say this stuff. Some of my clients get so upset when I do posts about this. But the truth is, people just need to be aware again and have that in the back of their thought while they're making decisions. But alcohol is one of those things that probably alcohol and trans fats off the top of my head are two things that if you can eliminate, do so. Interesting though, for a long time, people who drink moderately actually live longer than those people who completely abstain. And I believe that's because of social reasons. Once upon a time, alcohol was a very vital part of social engagement. I think that culture is changing. I think there's so much community around fitness these days that you can find groups of friends that are like, hey, let's go for a ruck, or hey, let's go hit the weight room, or things like. Certainly all my friends, I've always had buddies who I go and lift with. So.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm going to the sauna with friends these days, which I love. Bathhouses. I love the culture that's developing. It's great to see. All right, Jacob, let's head into topic 2 for today. We're going to talk about dumbing down grocery shopping. I know this is a great one for you. If you go to Jacob's Instagram, he has a ton of great clips where he's physically in the grocery store. Jacob, we've all done it when we go to the grocery store hungry, and that could be deemed as a cardinal sin at sometimes. Maybe you just worked out, you ventured into the snack aisle, just a little something to keep you satiated while you go back to your produce and chicken. So hungry or not, how do we grocery shop with weight loss at the forefront?
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting to see the studies that suggest when you're grocery shopping hungry, you're going to make bad decisions. And even the psychology of how grocery stores are built out so that you spend more money. I think they both highlight one really important thing, which I was talking about. Do not mindlessly eat. And that means that you want to go into the grocery store with a plan, and you want to know why you're going there, and have your hit list, like the regular stuff that you purchase. Like I mentioned, those raspberries I have every morning. Like every week I spend $35 on just berries, and I eat every day. I'll have a container of raspberries, and I'll have a container of blueberries every single day. So know the foods that work for you in the sense of you can adhere and sustain them in your diet, and have a plan before you step into the grocery store.
Let's talk about some general recommendations here. We're going to tiptoe around this again. Everybody's a case by case, but kind of what are those big, what are the big check mark items that we want to do? You can talk about it from a macro perspective, or you can actually give some more tangible takeaways. Yeah.
So I think first and foremost, the foundation of a diet is lean protein. You mentioned my Instagram. I commonly talk about what's called the protein test, which means that for every, as an example, if you walked up to a package and it had 20 grams of protein on it, I would say that product or that food should have 200 calories or less. So take the grams of protein, simply add a 0 to it, and does it have that many calories or less, then that food passes the protein test. Why? Because every coach out there is giving people protein goals. And the first thing anybody who starts tracking what they're eating struggles with is getting adequate protein while staying under their calories. So lean protein is the foundation of a diet. Doesn't mean that saturated fat doesn't have a place in your diet, but leaner proteins is a great option to start for the first foundation. And then fruit and vegetables. Very, very important. Fruit, vegetables, and lean protein. That's your solid foundation, and then you can build off it from there. And again, fruit and vegetables are so important because they're so high in micronutrients, and they also just low calorie while being very filling. We talked about BMI and that generic advisement, how it's good for public health. You've heard people always say, have 5 fruits, 5 vegetables. That's not really based on anything per se. It's just really good generic advisement because it's a great way to get micronutrients in your diet and also get fiber. And I would say for public health, that's great. And then also getting that wide array of colors where people are like, eat all different colors of fruit and vegetables. Again, really a great idea because that's going to expose you to different types of antioxidants and different types of vitamins and minerals. So I think those are highly important. And then we talked about those hemp seeds that you love. Those are omega-3s. So we have there's 11 types of omega-3s, but we really only talk about 3, DHA and EPA. Those come from fish. And then you have ALA, which comes from plant sources. And it's very important that you get omega-3s in your diet. So certainly when you're shopping things like salmon, anchovies. I know not everybody loves anchovies. I do, but I do. Anchovies, sardines. These are really important to incorporate in your diet. Walnuts, another excellent option. You want to incorporate some form of omega-3s. So that'd be my animal protein that's lean, fruit, vegetables, and then some sort of omega-3, preferably fish, but you can also have some ALA sources like you touched on earlier.
Hang out in that produce section. Micronutrient diversity has been a huge incorporation in the last several years for me.
Yeah.
And make a rainbow on your plate, as you said.
Yes.
I mean, there's truth to that.
Yes.
The more amount of diversity, I went from having maybe, I used to be the classic chicken, rice, and broccoli type person 5 years ago. And then I went from eating 5 different vegetables in a week to I eat 35 different plants in a week, right? And again, are we going to suggest that to somebody just starting out on their journey? No. But, if you can kind of understand where you are now and where you can eventually be to not only emphasize weight loss, but to emphasize longevity as well.
Yeah.
Let's talk about planning meals, Jacob. I think meal prepping, is very daunting to a lot of people. And I think it's mostly because, well, it's one, they don't want to spend their full Sunday in the kitchen. And, I want to go, I'm going to order these meals instead. How can we just make it very simplified for them?
I love what you just said about spending all Sunday in the kitchen because it's such a myth. People view meal prep as this like clandestine bodybuilder meathead activity. And it's like they get copious amounts of meat and their fruit and their vegetables and their rice. And they spend hours in the kitchen. They put everything in the Tupperware containers. And then that's all they'll eat until next Sunday when they meal prep again. And one, I think it's incredibly important to have flexibility in your diet. 20% of the food I eat is flexible.
80-20.
Yes, yeah. 80-20. And even going back to the grocery shopping, like I mentioned, like the fruit, the vegetables, the omega-3s. Look, I also have some I love this brand. I don't know, can I mention a specific brand or no? Yasso ice cream bars. I buy them and I have one or two almost every single night. And there's flexibility for those things. We've got so fixated on acting like nobody's ever going to have a glass of wine or nobody's going to ever have any processed food. Like I have amazing health markers and I am I'm in great shape and I still enjoy things in my diet that I actually love. And I go out to dinner and these things. So just talking about it from a standpoint of like one at the grocery store and then even with meal prepping, like I think it's very important to be flexible in some of the nutrition you eat. And when it comes to meal prepping, this idea that you're just going to do it all on a Sunday, that's nonsense. I tell people to make it more palatable, just think about cooking in bulk. Anytime I would make a meal, outside of making a sandwich, I always make multiples of it. So if tonight I'm cooking dinner, I cook salmon, I would make enough servings of salmon that we as a family could sit down and eat it. And then I would make sure there's an extra 2 servings. And that will be my lunch for tomorrow, and maybe it'll be my lunch for the next day. And the night after, maybe we have chicken, and I'm going to cook enough that there's multiple servings. And maybe that's because I eat more than 2-3 meals a day. I eat about 4 meals a day. I'll have a couple extra servings of chicken now. So now I can have salmon one day and in that same day have chicken as one of my extra meals. And that's the best way to view meal prepping, as simply cooking in bulk. I would challenge you, if you want to get better at meal prepping, don't ever cook one meal. Make multiples of it. If you're making broccoli, make an entire bag full of broccoli. Put the rest in your refrigerator. Now you have broccoli to go pick at whenever you want to snack next. And I know I sound out of touch when I'm saying snack on broccoli, but just you could add the broccoli to your sandwich or your burger or whatever you're having. I'm not saying have it by itself, but having those vegetables ready is going to make it much easier to adhere to your diet.
Right. Just setting yourself up for success,
Huge.
batch cooking, et cetera. You don't have to be meticulous in the sense of putting out every single Tupperware and piecing all these meals together. It's pretty easy to roast things too. We love just throwing things into the oven and a couple sheet pans. Yeah, exactly. So, it doesn't have to be as scary as a lot of people, I think.
I mean, I eat 4 meals a day. And so I consistently have 2 extra meals sitting in my kitchen, but they're cooked when I cook in bulk, and then I just grab them each day with me. And it's not like they're left over for 5 days. Right. You can meal prep as you go by cooking in batch, as you said. Right.
Let's talk about cooking versus ordering out. I want to talk about what comes with dining out. And again, we're not saying not to dine out.
Yep.
Social is the top 5th pillar. If we're saying that sleep, nutrition, movement, and stress are the 4, I mean, we have to add social in there as the 5, and that's a big dialogue right now.
Yep.
So we're not saying never go out. That's part of life. That's part of socialization. But let's talk about purely the health metrics when we're looking at cooking at home versus, eating out.
So I eat out at least once a week because social is so incredibly important. But having said that, you need to face the reality that restaurant food tastes better because of butter, sugar, and oil. I helped a chef, head chef of a major food hospitality group. They started out in seafood. Now they have steak restaurants. They're throughout the country. I think they're actually global at this point as well. They're in other nations. And he lost 110 pounds with me, the chef. And he showed me, he said, hey, I want you to come in and get a steak. So I came in, and he showed me that when they got done cooking the steak, which they used butter and oil to prep, afterwards, it sat there for a minute, cooled off. He opened up a sheet pan of melted butter, took the tongs, took the steak, dipped it in the butter, let it sit again, and then he garnished it with butter. And so that is why restaurant food tastes so good. It's because of butter, sugar, and oil. I can give you another example. Sirloin steak, 5 ounces, approximately 250 calories, depending on the cut of meat. And when you look at that on a franchise restaurant where they're forced to show you the calories, that same steak will be 750 calories. So we go from 250 to 750 calories for the same steak. So one of the things I do with coaching clients is they send me menus, and then I vet them ahead of time for them, 24 hours. And for you, what I can say for if you're a person listening to this podcast is start just having the realization that whatever you're eating when you're out to dinner, it's way more calories than normal. You could basically easily add 2-3 tablespoons, depending on what you're ordering, of olive oil in your estimation of how many calories that food has. So.
Yeah. What are your recommendations in terms of kind of weaning off of that lifestyle, right? Especially here, let's talk about here in New York City, right? The accessibility. This is not upstate New York.
Yes.
Upstate New York, we grew up, we'll get pizza on Friday night, but that's all you get. Here, I can have anything at my fingertips within 2 minutes. So, how do we wean out of that? Well, I'm at the office, or I'm even working from home these days, which is, just life. And I'm ordering my lunch because I'm in between meetings. Oh, well, now, that meeting went to 6 o'clock. All right, I'm going to order again.
Yep.
How do we transition out of this?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is, remember, it's okay to go out to dinner and you want to be social. You just need to be aware when you're sitting down that the portions you need to have don't need to be gigantic. No one needs a 16-ounce steak. Just get out of it. I'm not saying you can't order it because that's the cut of meat you want, but just you have lunch for the next day. That's all that means. And that just means that you might not need 3 appetizers along with your entree when you go out to eat. So first of all, practice moderation. That's the most pivotal thing. And then secondly, start to think about the decisions you make prior to dinner. So if you know you're going out to dinner, like when I go out for Sushi Friday, I know that I'm going to have a more modest breakfast than normal. Definitely my next meal is going to be more modest. My next meal will probably be just chicken and vegetables. I'll probably still have my berries with some Greek yogurt for breakfast. And then my third meal will be something small, maybe even just like a protein shake with like some fruit in it so that I have calories saved for dinner. And that's the most important thing, I think, again, is just being aware of what you're doing and how much you truly are eating. Even if it looks like it's a Caesar salad. A Caesar salad, most traditional Caesar salads have 800 calories. That's on par with what a cheeseburger has. They have similar amount of calories. So, and when I talk about that, I mean a restaurant cheeseburger. Those, if you look at a franchise menu, they have very similar calories.
Yeah, I'm not going to call any franchise out here, but I have seen a 1,200 calorie salad before, and my mind was blown. So, you got to keep up with this
There's
stuff.
a restaurant here in New York that really fought to not have their calories on their menu. And it's because their spare ribs have 1,600 calories.
Oh, my goodness.
Just the spare ribs before any of the sides.
Right. Yeah. Forget the potatoes and the rest of the order.
Yeah.
Healthy snacks.
Yeah.
This is a big one. Now, we're going to get to the on-the-go portion of the segment in just a second here. But let's talk about healthy snacks that we're keeping around in the house.
Yep. So I actually have on my website on jacobzemer.com, I have a full macro-friendly or healthy snacks guide that helps break down all this stuff. And what we really did was people are going to have snacks. I have snacks. Like you might look at me and be like, this guy is like not having, that's not true. I have like protein Pop-Tarts some mornings. Like if I'm in a rush and I can't have my Greek yogurt and berries, I still have the berries, but I'll have 2 of these protein Pop-Tarts for my breakfast. And then I'll go about, and the majority of my day is single ingredient foods. But I keep these snacks just in case I get busy. I literally keep them in the back of my car. So I have those protein Pop-Tarts. I have some protein chips in the back of my car in case I'm ever just in a hurry and I'm running around. I think of things like protein powder, protein bars as almost like training wheels. You go to learn how to ride a bike, and like I said, everybody struggles at first. Like, how do I hit my protein target while staying down on my calories? And more often than not, they tip over, right? And adding some protein powders like training wheels. We had that study that came out this year. It compared 25 grams of protein to 100 grams of protein synthesis, and the person with the 100 grams, how they were maintaining muscle protein synthesis for an extended period of time, 10 hours, it looked like from the study. So I always tell people, like, if you're new and you're really, really struggling, just put 2 scoops in your post-workout shake. Put 3 scoops in your post-workout shake, and open your mind up to even that helping you with fiber. There are like gummies out there that are high fiber that taste absolutely delicious. There's one company, they use Swedish fish, and they taste delicious. And I'd still be using fruit and vegetables as the core crux of my fiber, but keeping those around, like if I'm struggling to get enough fiber in that day and I need a quick pick-me-up, that's an easy way to do so. There are carb wraps out that they simply have modified starch, and they have higher fiber macros in them. And so that's a great way if I'm struggling to get in enough fiber for the day. These kind of healthy snacks are really vital. So,
all right, those are kind of the emergency floats,
yes.
Instead of popping into, the corner bodega or a deli and just finding what they have, right? I think,
Yep.
How do we feel about, let's talk about, keeping nuts at home and kind of just more of those, quick, when we think of snacks, we think of putting, a couple of things over, 20 minutes, and maybe I'm jumping on my next call, or, I'm about to do something else. How do we feel about keeping nuts in the house, seeds, or anything else that I think are those more classic snacks?
So when you think about it for like traditional snacks, we talked about meal prepping. And so you'll always have prepared food in the house. But then even outside of that, I've mentioned Greek yogurt I have on a regular basis, cottage cheese, hard boiling some eggs, or even buying them from the store, hard boiled. These are incredible, easy snacks that you can keep around. And like I said, I always have tons of fresh fruit. I have grapefruit, I have raspberries, I have blueberries, I have blackberries, I have oranges, apples at all times in my house. And these are kind of the traditional snacks we think about. When it comes to like nuts and things like that, just be careful of portion. Now, they're incredibly high in monounsaturated fat, which is incredibly, we call them PUFAs and MUFAs, right? Monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, incredible for your health. But you still need to really portion it. So just make sure that you're just, I've had a unhealthy relationship with peanut butter before, and now I finally have a healthy relationship with peanut butter. I was forced to, because when my girlfriend and I moved in, I'm like, all right, well, now I'm stuck with peanut butter in the house. So, it's great, it's healthy fats, but just make sure that you portion it correctly.
It's hard not to have a toxic relationship with peanut butter.
So
I mean,
hard.
come on, smooth or crunchy?
Crunchy.
All right,
Crunchy.
You can stay.
Yeah.
So making it a family effort, Jacob, how do we get the household on the same page? This is one I'm sure you hear a lot. It's one I hear a lot. And it's like, I'm trying really hard, but my wife or my husband or whoever, they like to eat this, and then I end up caving, and, we sit down to watch a movie, and this person wants to eat that. So then I'm like, okay, how do we navigate that dialogue?
Sure. So let me start with first the reality of it. We talked about that success rate of diets are 3%, and that so many people regain the weight, and that if you have somebody who's doing the journey with you, how much the statistics jump to start getting in your favor when you have 3 or more people on that journey with you. And probably the most important person to have that journey with you are the people at home. And that's difficult. I would tell you to first start with yourself and focus in on yourself, and then try to encourage your partner to even go do various different training with you. So I'm very into weight training, but I've got my girlfriend to go on weight training, and fitness is not her passion, but it's something that she likes to do. And I think, there's been a little bit of a push just because I'm there, and sometimes I get compliments or things like this. So that's a little bit of fuel for fire. But she now loves Pilates. And I've never been to a Pilates class in my life. I would tell you, if your best luck getting your partner to start getting involved in fitness is to help them on their fitness journey fall in love with fitness. Because once upon a time as a high school kid, I was having ice cream every night before bed. I don't do that anymore. And it's only because I fell in love with weight training. Otherwise, I'd be having cookie dough or peanut butter ice cream every single night. And so if you can get your partner to go out there and try a boxing class or a Pilates class or a yoga class, almost think about it like they're out there, like they're serial dating until they fall in love with something in fitness. And once you do, it's very powerful. And that's a great gateway to getting them to start thinking about their nutrition and the rest of their choices.
I love that. And then you find new ways to do activities together, which
Yes.
is just going to help your relationship
Yes.
as well. I love it.
Yes.
Let's move on, Jacob. Let's go into topic 3 for today. You touched on this slightly in terms of those spare tires that you keep in the car, but fueling on the go and vacation eating.
Yes.
This is probably the most exciting topic, I think, today.
Yeah.
We have some great tips here. So, whether we're going to the kids' soccer game or headed out of town for business, it can be challenging to keep nutrition in check with a busy schedule. I want to talk about the tips that make it easier, how to pack on the go, how to ensure you're staying on top of weight loss goals, because that can be a slippery slope, especially, for me, I'm on the road for business a lot. I see what goes on, and it's tough too from a social perspective
Yes.
to kind of be that outlier, right?
Yep.
So, let's start with high protein snacks for your bag or purse. You touched on a little bit, not to sound repetitive, but also weave that into the airport hacks too.
Yeah.
What are you getting at the airport?
So I think, from when I was a kid, these protein-friendly snacks have changed so much. Like I remember the first protein I ever had, I won't name the brand, but it was endorsed World's Strongest Man. And I remember trying to chew through this thing and it was impossible. Like you needed like a liter of water to like eat this thing. And the way the world's changed now, there's such a variety of, jerkies or protein bars out there. I think come prepared. If you're going to be traveling, if you're going to, whether it's your purse or your carry-on bag, make sure that you have it with you before you walk on the door. Don't be reliant on circumstance. Even if you're the kids' soccer game, maybe you plan on afterwards going somewhere to eat and you've already vetted the menu, so you're good. But I don't know, maybe they're in overtime, or for whatever reason the game starts late or there's delay because of weather. You don't want to be sitting there hungry and be like, okay, I guess I'm going to have a hot dog now. You want to be the one in control. And so again, that comes down to just not eating mindlessly and always being prepared for these situations, being conscientious as you walk out the door. And when it comes to whether it's airports or even grocery stores, I love that consumer spending is changing shelving. It's having such a positive impact. When I go to one of my favorite franchise grocery stores, the candy aisle, now some of the candy is gone and there's protein bars on that. I was like, my mind was blown. When you go to an airport, there's these, fiber gummies, there's these jerkies, there's these protein bars, there's hard-boiled eggs, there's all these things. And so my fitness journey has actually gotten easier because people as a whole are buying into fitness.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It's gosh, the airport selections, I think just in the last 2 to 3 years
Yep.
has been the most pivotal change that I've noticed.
Yeah.
I want to talk about business trips in specific because I think this will apply to a lot of people out there. And this is something, I continue to navigate, there's a lot of drinking that goes
Yes.
involved. I do not drink. There's a lot of late nights, so that's going to impact our sleep.
Yep.
And there's a lot of eating out and, you may not be on the same page. Now you're going to go to dinner. You're not going to not go to dinner and
Yep.
sit in your hotel room and eat, pre-made food. But, how do we kind of navigate this in a comfortable way? Because I think a lot of people may feel uncomfortable. They're going to take that drink even though they don't really want it. And, how do we change the way that we navigate this to make ourselves comfortable in these situations?
Yeah, so I think from a cultural standpoint, we talked about how the shelves have changed in the last couple of years. I think it's changed also that eating healthy is now seen as a positive thing and as almost a bit of a flex. So most people are like, wow, great, you're eating healthy. Like occasionally you're going to be with somebody because work, you're not in control 100%. You might be with somebody, a client or whomever, a boss that's like, oh no, we got to try this. We got to have this. Why are you eating this? But the vast majority of people now, if you tell them like, oh, I'm just watching what I eat, they have a lot of respect for that.
Yep.
Alcohol, however, is not quite there yet. You do see the cultural shift. You see it with millennials and purchasing and things like this. It's starting to make that shift, but most work cultures still encourage drinking. And it's I always tell people, like, when it comes to that, just try to get your drink and just milk it. A glass of wine can sit there on the table and you can just slowly sip on it. I'm the king of this. I'll have like my glass of wine. I'll barely be sipping on it. And then it'll come time to get the next round and everybody will be like, well, I'll only do a few. I was like, I'll finish this glass. Go ahead. And then they all buy another round and I don't finish that first glass of wine. So, I think just taking your time with it is a smart thing. And then I always tell clients, you want to play with the house's money. Whenever it comes to a diet, especially on the road, you want to start light. So you want to start your breakfast with something like egg whites or non-fat Greek yogurt, fruit and vegetables, as low calorie protein as you can get. So that way you have more disposable calories as you go into that work dinner. Same's true with lunch. If you can get like a salad, put the dressing on the side, you can skewer your fork in it, dip your fork in the dressing, then skewer the protein, then the protein, the vegetables, then you don't have as many calories while having the salad because the dressing's on the side, or the stir fry with the sauce on the side, and then you walk into dinner with extra margin room. And you can still try to make the best decisions possible. It doesn't mean that's an excuse to go all out, but the best way is to be in control before you walk into that work dinner. Because you might not be during.
Yep, I agree. I do agree with your point on the alcohol. I've seen that shift tremendously.
Yeah.
I was in Texas a couple of weeks ago. I was the only one at the table that didn't order a drink. And surprisingly enough, every person said, wow, good for you. That's great.
Yes.
That wasn't the dialogue.
No.
And different people in different situations, but that wasn't the case 3-4 years ago at all. It was, oh, come on, you can let loose, have some fun. We know you're into fitness, but it's just for tonight. And, it just wasn't the same response. It's really refreshing. And I'm seeing more mocktails on menus now more than ever too, which is great. I saw, I'm not going to say it, but I'm going to saw a greens powder that I've been taking for a number of years on a restaurant in Austin, Texas the other day. And I absolutely love to see it.
It's amazing. I think there's been such a big opening of mental health and the conversation around that too, that people are more comfortable with like topics like alcohol and stuff like that. And people, if you don't want to drink, they don't really want to touch why. It could be fitness or it could be for other reasons, but they're comfortable to just be like, all right, well, good for you. Right.
Exactly. Shouldn't change the conversation that you're having at the table. Vacationing. So
Yes.
Vacation isn't a free-for-all, right? You're there to have fun. You're there to let loose, but it doesn't have to apply to nutrition. How do we find the balance?
I'm going to surprise you with this answer, okay? So I always say, like, when people hire me, I'm like, you don't necessarily going to get in shape. You'll just find out what it takes to get in shape. And then at that point, it's your choice. The body you want may not be what you're willing to do to get there. It just simply might not be. You might want to look a certain way, be 10% body fat or whatever, and you might not be willing to make the sacrifices or the changes to your lifestyle to get there. And so when it comes to going on vacation, you can definitely go all out. You can. That's a lifestyle. You can do it. I wouldn't recommend it, but you probably won't have the body you want if you're going on multiple vacations and just going all out multiple times a year. The way I approach it, like I am going away this summer to Greece. Last summer, I went away to Italy. The way I approached Italy was here's what I know. I love pasta. I love pasta. I like wine, red wine. I like it. I don't really care about dessert. So there I have my kind of hierarchy because we've got 3 major things that are in Italy. Italy's got pasta. Certain parts have steak too, like Florence, but they've got pasta for sure. They've got wine for sure. And they've got incredible desserts. So when I was there, I had pasta every day. I had just a little bit of wine, maybe 3-4 glasses, not a lot. And I had almost no dessert. Like I would take like a bite of the gelato or whatever because I don't really care about dessert. And because wine I just like, but pasta I love. And so I had the things that I loved while I was on vacation. If you asked me, did I enjoy, I really enjoyed the food in Italy, but that didn't mean I enjoyed everything.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think you touched on it, knowing what it takes to get to where you want to be and kind of having that mastery over yourself. Like for me, I was in a wedding last weekend, and the lead up to that wedding, I was like, I know what I got to do to look and feel like what I want. I was in the wedding, right? So I was like, all right, like we're in prep. And I know what I had to do to get there.
Yep.
And then the couple of days, and when the wedding came and the couple of days into that weekend, I wasn't monitoring the way I would at home, right? And now I'm 5 days out of that, and I'm like, okay, we're going to get back into it now. So I think by mastering, these skills and understanding what does and doesn't work for you will provide you with so much freedom and so much less stress when it comes to weddings and vacations and business trips. And you'll just start to understand what you need to do. And all right, I can slack off because I know, in 3 or 4 days or so, I know exactly what I have to get back to doing.
Yeah, and even with training when I was in Italy, I mapped out the gyms. So we went to the gym. I was trying to think before I got on the podcast. It was at 3 or 4 days, but it was 3 or 4 days. I did modified workouts that were like 40 minutes long. I didn't lift anywhere near because they don't have 120-pound dumbbells in Italy. So I lifted less weight than I normally do. And guess what? I got great workouts. And then when I got home, I wasn't like, man, I haven't worked out in a week. This is going to be horrible.
Just get the blood flowing. I just sent we do a weekly newsletter, The Catalyst. And, I kept it pretty relevant to my life. And I said, here's what you do when you're out of state for a wedding. I was doing a zone 2 incline cardio session, and then I did some calisthenics with the body weight.
Yes.
And I got out. Everybody else was in the lobby, already eating, but I had gotten my sweat in. I had gotten the blood flow going. I had color in my face, and I was ready to go shower and start the day, right? And then that was like a checkbox. So, and it's good physically, but then I think it's equally as great mentally as well. Like, you feel good about what you did. You got your day started. You got your brain activated. So
something is better than nothing.
Right. Exactly. We're going to wrap it up here with our final one, Jacob, programming for weight loss. So again, guys, it's going to depend. So, a lot of times people are taking their goals into their own hands. Maybe they head into an online forum. Maybe it's BB.com. Maybe it's, seeking education for yourself on YouTube and articles. But a lot, let's say most don't even really know where to start. So weight loss, fat loss, getting leaner, however we want to label it here. People have been searching for the secret gym hack or the secret kitchen hack for decades now. How can we simplify the approach when we're in the gym to equip people at home with a structured routine to get them closer? So we've touched a little bit on this throughout the episode, but this portion is really going to give the users some tangible takeaways for how they can program, their workout routine once this episode ends.
For fat loss.
Great.
So I think the first thing is when it comes to like training split, people get so preoccupied. Generically, push-pull legs or legs push-pull is a great split. If you're more advanced, like I have right now, I'm working on calves, I'm working on biceps, I'm working on triceps and lateral delt. And that's what the priority is in my training. And I structure my training totally around that. So look and say, like, what do I really want to accomplish here? If you're looking to lose fat, you want to be weight training 4 to 6 times a week. Because again, you want to maintain muscle and you, if possible, want to build muscle. And so start with that 4 to 6 days a week, whatever you can recover from. That's your first and most important thing in the gym. And then you want to make sure the sets are challenging. You want to make sure that you're pain-free while doing them. You want to make sure that they're full range of motion. There's some debate on that, but for now, that's a good recommendation, full range of motion. And you want them to be intense. They want to be somewhere in the range of near to failure. For those sets to be effective stimulus, you really have to push yourself. And then when it comes to cardio, assuming that you can, do 4 to 6 days a week, a great recommendation would be to somewhere between 30 minutes plus of zone 2 cardio after you get done lifting weights. Now, you can do less. The American Heart Rate Association's recommendation is 2.5 hours of zone 2 cardio, which is why I said this is maybe the second most depressing thing we'll talk about today, how much exercise you should be doing. Or you can be doing 75 minutes of intense cardio, which is like zone 4 and 5 where the heart rate's really pumping.
Circuit training.
Figure out what's right for you with your schedule. I do zone 2 because it's less fatiguing. And so I'll do my weight training very intensely, and then I'll put a vest on and I'll walk it like a 14, 15-minute mile, very brisk walk, and I'll get my heart rate into that zone 2, and that's what I do for my training. And I think for most people, that is a really great place when you're thinking about fat loss. If you're not there yet, if this stuff just doesn't even sound appetizing to you and you're listening to podcasts like this for motivation, go out and try different modalities of fitness. You have to get out there. It's like if you were single and you want to have a family. Go out, serial date, try all these different modalities. You probably will find something you love. It could be swimming, it could be cycling, it could be any number of things. Go out there and search for it would be my recommendation in that case.
There are some days where I'm doing that dedicated incline walk, or I'm doing a Stairmaster, et cetera, for my zone 2. And I want you to circle back on zone 2 and talk about why we call that the fat burning stage.
Yeah.
But I mean, now, my partner and I, we're going out to play racquetball.
Yes.
We're playing.
Yeah.
I think we've lost touch with just our playful side and playing some pickup basketball or soccer and things of that nature. You guys have heard me say this a couple of times now, but that's cardio.
Yeah.
That's cardio.
Yes.
Why do we call zone 2 the fat burning stage?
Well, there's a lot of beliefs about like glucose and what you're burning and things like this. I think the most important thing to really take away about zone 2 is that it's incredibly good for our health markers while at the same time not being fatiguing. I wouldn't get caught up in these zones being like, this is what's going to burn fat. More importantly, I would think about it as either I need to do 2.5 hours of moderate cardio or 75 minutes of intense cardio. So 150 minutes of moderate or 75 minutes of intense cardio a week as a baseline for my health. And either one of those is going to help you burn fat. Again, though, I would prioritize weight training if it was strictly a fat loss phase. But either one of those will help with fat. But most importantly, they're going to help with health. And that's why, again, I would really recommend that you do those recommendations in cardio, one or the other modalities. I love zone 2 because you can recover from it. If I'm weight training really intensely 6 days a week, I'm already pretty beat up from that. So I need something that's a little bit softer on my hip flexor, a little bit easier on my body, and that isn't going to make me fall asleep at like 7 o'clock because I have a family and, I already go to bed at like 9 o'clock and I get teased for it.
Yeah. Jacob, there are people at home who are saying, what the heck is zone 2 and how do I even know what my zone 2 is? How do I know what my zone 2 is? Because my zone 2 is different than your zone 2.
Yes. So you have to establish the most optimal ways to establish a maximum heart rate. But with wearables in these days, it's easier and easier to do that. And generically, for most people, it's going to be somewhere around 110 to 130 beats per minute. Zone 2 is 60 to 70% of your maximum heart rate. And again, start somewhere. You don't have to we talked about your VO2 max testing. That's not everybody who's listening to this podcast is going to do their VO2 max. And not everybody's going to establish their precise number with zone 2. But if you're walking and you have some sort of wearable on, and you're tracking that you're around 110 or 120 beats per minute, you're likely in zone 2.
And, what do we say? You should be able to hold a casual conversation during this, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Last one here, Jacob. Fasted versus non-fasted cardio. Break this one for us.
Yeah. So Brad Schoenfield, many people consider him, he's a researcher. People consider him the godfather of hypertrophy. He was the first person to really study this, and what he found was that fasted cardio might be slightly better, and that fasted cardio is definitely not worse than non-fasted cardio. But the problem I have with fasted cardio is for most people it's not sustainable. And so if you wake up and you have the treadmill at home and you have free time like that in the morning, or if you don't eat till later in the day, go ahead and do it. But it's not going to move the needle. Yeah. It's not.
You mentioned prioritizing the strength portion of your workout for the day over the cardio. So, warm up, do your mobility, get into some strength work, and then, hit the treadmill for that 30 minutes to wrap it up. A lot of people do vice versa because they say, oh, I want to get warmed up. Well, let's actually warm up those specific areas of the body through intentional mobility and activation exercises. Do your strength workout where you're going to have the most energy and less fatigue.
Correct.
And then move into the cardio. And is that the correct way of thinking how we're approaching this?
100%, because you have to understand if you don't elicit sufficient stimulus while weight training, meaning you think about a percentile of when your one max rep is, if you're not lifting heavy enough weight for adequate amount of repetitions, it's not going to be sufficient to challenge your body. It's not going to help you maintain or build muscle. I have my FMS, my functional movement screen, all this education on various different certifications. And a lot of times my warm up is 2 sets of squats. If I don't have a particular issue of mobility, my shoulder mobility is more integral. I do some rotator stuff and things like that. But I have great hip mobility. I have no lower back pain. So my warm up is a couple sets of squats. I definitely would not get on a treadmill and tire out my legs prior to going in weight training. I want my first sets to be the most, I radically warm up, but after that, I want those to be my most intense sets. Oftentimes I reverse pyramid. My first sets will be the heaviest. I'll do 2 sets like that, and then I'll do a set where it's lighter weight for more repetitions.
Jacob, thanks for joining us today. I want you to lead the user. Maybe it's those 3 points that you mentioned earlier in the episode, but the 3 points of advice for people to keep in mind when they're just starting their weight loss journey.
Sure. I think the first and foremost thing is get your labs done annually. I know that that's not directly related to weight loss, but you have to be alive to lose weight. So please go get your health markers tested. It's extremely important. Secondly, really understand there's a bunch of stuff out there, glucose, all of this stuff, different fad diets. It's still about eating less calories than you are consuming. So always be aware portion size is the most important things. And there's lots of ways to get to different portion sizes, whether it's ketosis or carnivore or being a vegetarian. Those are all just ways or modalities that ideally would remove some calories from your diet and allow you to lose weight. And the third thing is how crucial VO2 max is. VO2 max is incredibly important for your health. And I'm sorry, I know we talked about fat loss the whole time, but I always think public health first and foremost because you have to be alive. So I think VO2 max is extremely important. But the flip side is if you want to lose weight, lift weights.
Love it. Jacob, thanks so much for stopping by today. Tell the audience how they can follow along in the rest of your journey and for additional advice.
Sure. So I'm on Instagram. It's Jacob Zemer, JACOBZEMER. I put out content there daily, a few stories up every single day. I'm also on YouTube. We've been growing that a lot. I love my YouTube. I love doing long format content, longer conversations like that where I'm not refined to 60 seconds to like pump out a message. I love putting up those YouTubes. And then if you follow along one of those are the best place to kind of see, do you like the tone of voice and what I do? And then you can always click the link tree and go to jacobzemer.com.
Great. Thanks, Jacob.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to an episode here at Bodybuilding.com. Stay tuned for more stories along the way.